Wanderlust Jane here, welcome to another video. I'm a Florentine tour guide born and raised in the city, and this is a part 2 of my virtual tour of Florence. If you missed part 1, I'll put the link in the description box down below. Let's get started, but first, the intro. In part 1, we started from the Medici Palace and then we entered in the Basilica of San Lorenzo and in the Medici Chapels. In this video, we are going to talk about the Duomo Square, the religious center, and Piazza della Repubblica. So let's start exactly where we ended the previous video. Alright guys, now it's time to go to the religious center, to the Duomo Square. So as you can see, we are back at the entrance of the Medici Chapels, and let's walk. It will take a few seconds, actually, to go to the religious center. It's so nice to see the city full of people, but it will go back to normal, hopefully, once everything is over. So here we are. Welcome to Piazza Duomo. The square contains the baptistry, the oldest building in the structure, the cathedral, Santa Maria del Fiore, with its gorgeous dome, the bell tower of Giotto, and here the Opera del Duomo Museum. Then we also have Santa Reparata, the ruins of the old Cathedral of Florence inside the new one. And this is the baptistry, believed to be erected on the ruins of a pagan temple consecrated to Mars, or on the ruins of a domus of the Romans. Domus means house. We don't really know exactly what was here in the early centuries, but we know that the structure that we see right now was first erected in the 500s. Then, in the 11th century, the decoration that you actually see right now was started, and then its dome was erected between the 12th and the 13th century. In the Renaissance, the most important, let's say, aspect of this place were the doors. This is the Paradise Door, a nickname that the great Michelangelo chose for this door because of the beauty, as you can clearly see, of this artwork. It's a gilded copper wooden door with the histories of the Old Testament. There are 10 panels with different histories, Genesis, David and Goliath, etc. Lorenzo Ghiberti took 25 years of his life between the 1425 and 1452 to create this door, and this is the second door that he built. The first one, from 1401, has stories of the New Testament. This is how the baptistry looks from the inside. You can clearly see that there are two different areas here. This sort of walkway or terrace is the matroneo, from matrona, that means woman, and it was the space for women. Women and men had to sit separated. And this is the stunning mosaic. The artists who worked for these mosaics were artists of the late 1200s. We don't exactly know who they are, we have just a few names. And this is a stunning example of Byzantine art. The theme that you see here is the Last Judgment. You can clearly see the giant figure of Christ. This is a stunning view on Santa Maria del Fiore, which is the main cathedral of Florence, the bell tower of Giotto of the early 1300s, and the dome of Filippo Brunelleschi. At the end of the 1200s, there was another cathedral here. It was called Santa Reparata, but it was too small and not decorated enough for the new emerging town of the Middle Ages, and that was Florence, of course. So we decided to build a new cathedral that was supposed to be bigger than the cathedrals of the rival cities of Tuscany, as well as Pisa and Siena, for example. So the first stone of Santa Maria del Fiore was laid on September 8, 1296. And Santa Maria del Fiore means the Virgin Mary of the flower. The flower in this case is the lily or iris, symbol of Florence. As we enter, we can start to see from here the counter facade, which has the oldest decoration. This is, in fact, a mosaic of Gaddo Gaddi of the late 1200s about the coronation of the Virgin Mary. Next to that, we have angels and musicians of another artist called the Santi di Tito, but this time from the end of the 1500s. And then, to complicate things a little bit more, this is a clock of the Renaissance, of the 1400s, frescoed by Paolo Uccello with the 4 evangelists here. If you look at this clock, it's a little bit weird. First of all, it has 24 hours, and it starts from the bottom. It's counterclockwise, and it's something weird. There's something wrong about this, because it doesn't tell the modern time, but the time according to the Renaissance, when the day started at sunset of the previous day. So think of the 24 hours of the day from sunset to sunset. You can clearly see that the church is vast and austere, and it's a little bit in contrast with the facade. The facade, however, is not the original. The original facade of Arnolfo di Cambio, who was the first architect of this place, was dismantled in the 1500s. And we waited for a few centuries until at the end of the 1800s, in 1887, we built the new facade. So that part only, it's modern. The rest of the church is from the 12 and the 1400s. Here you can see the frescoes of an equestrian monument of 2 soldiers. This man here on the left is Niccolò da Tolentino. The one on the right is Giovanni Acuto, or John Hopwood. The church back then, when it was built, was the biggest in the world. Now we have the 4th place. So we can say the iron or wood medal, something like that. At the very end of the central nave, there's the high altar with the stunning frescoes of the dome. When you reach the high altar and you look up, you have a stunning and gorgeous view of more than 3,600 square meters. If you do square feet, it's around 30,000 of fresco of the Last Judgment. It matches the decoration of the dome of the baptistry, but this is not a mosaic, it's a fresco, painted at the end of the 1500s by Giorgio Vasari and Federico Zuccari. In this detail, we can see Jesus Christ, then on his left-hand side, the Virgin Mary. On his right-hand side, close to him, we can see Adam and Eve, for example, and then St. John the Baptist, technically the cousin of Christ, and also the patron saint of Florence, because the baptistry, in fact, is the baptistry of St. John, San Giovanni Battista, as we say in Italian. When the church was finished, there was actually a huge part of it that was still missing, and I'm talking about the dome. So let's go back in time. We are now at the beginning of the 1400s, and we have no idea on how to build a dome as big as this one. We have no idea on how to do that because the diameter of the tambour, which is the octagon that you see here, is 45 meters or roughly 120 feet of diameter. So it's huge, too big for building one dome. Between 1418 and 1434, Filippo Brunelleschi, who was the artist that lost the competition with Lorenzo Ghiberti to build the new doors of the baptistry in the early 1400s, came back to Florence after studying in Rome with the solution of the problem. He basically was able to build not one, but two domes without any wooden scaffolding. This is, for example, a section of the dome. Basically, he decided to create a double shell with a space in between, as you can see. The inner shell is made of light bricks with a herringbone pattern. Think of the pattern as a fishbone or herringbone. The structure was more stable as you kept adding weight. Then there's the outer dome, that basically is just a protection of the inner dome. And the inner dome is the one with the fresco that we just saw. The last part that was added was the lantern and the golden orb. The golden orb was not added by Brunelleschi. Instead, it was the work of Andrea del Verrocchio that we mentioned before as well, so the mentor of Da Vinci, but that's from 1470-ish. So I want you to focus on the engineering technique that Brunelleschi used. So think of this dome built in the 1400s. So when you will be able to come to Florence and see how the structure is, you have goosebumps. You feel like you are a tiny part of the world because it's such huge and majestic. And it's the effect that we have nowadays in 2020. So think of the Florentine people that were looking at that dome in the 1400s, 600 years ago. So try to think on the effect, on the atmosphere, on everything when you enter and you're able to be up here on this dome with 463 steps. It's not an easy climb, but everyone can do it. Now, if you don't want to climb because you want to take a look at museums, there's a museum that I absolutely love, which is unfortunately not as popular as the Uffizi Gallery or the Accademia, and it's the museum right here. So you just have to walk on the lateral aisles of the cathedral and entering in this yellow building that you see here. This is in fact the Opera del Duomo Museum. And let's enter now in the Opera del Duomo Museum. Now you have to consider that this space where the museum is was once basically a warehouse. And an artist that you probably know, the great Michelangelo, in fact sculpted the statue of David right here. Then the centuries passed and the museum was opened to the public in 1891. As soon as you enter in the museum, you can find a reconstruction, a wooden reconstruction of the old facade of the Duomo, of the cathedral, the one that Arnolfo di Cambio built at the end of the 1200s. So you can kind of get the idea on how it looked like and how different it is from the modern one that we just saw. Then you don't expect to find actually a reconstruction on scale 1:1 of that facade, of the ancient one. So the other thing that you can do after seeing the wooden model, you basically keep walking and you have in front of you a reconstruction of the sacred space between the facade and the doors of the baptistry. So this is really like going back in time. It's a journey back in time. You are now in the Florence of the 1200s, of the Middle Ages. One of the masterpieces that I love the most about the ancient facade is this depiction of the Virgin Mary by Arnolfo di Cambio, so the architect who built the facade. This is called La Madonna degli occhi di vetro, which in English means the Virgin Mary with the glass eyes. You can see that it's still part of the Byzantine tradition, but the way that the drapery and the figure of the Virgin Mary is shown, it gives us the idea that something is changing, that we are entering in a new, let's say, way of depicting the statues, more realistic. And because Arnolfo di Cambio wanted this to be as realistic as possible, her eyes are actually made of glass paste. So you have to consider that this statue was above the main door of the church, and because of the glass eyes, the glass reflected the sunlight. So basically it looked alive. And for people that were living in Florence at the end of the 1200s, that was really impressive. So it really looked alive. There are a couple of more rooms in the museum. In one of the two, we have the Mary Magdalene of Donatello. Now, as you can see, she's a wooden sculpture that was once in the baptistry. And we can really see that she suffered a lot. She is the popular figure in the Eastern Church that was basically once a prostitute, and she spent 30 years repenting in the desert. So you can see from the way she looks that she had suffered. The following room is all for one statue that we call Pietà, basically in English is the pity or sorrow, of the great Michelangelo. Now you don't have to confuse that with the Pietà that you find in St. Peter's in the Vatican State, the one that made Michelangelo famous because he completed that statue when he was 23 years old. This is very different. He started this statue at the age of 72. Now, Michelangelo was able to live in a century with no medicines, no antibiotics for 89 years. So he had plenty of time to think, let's say, about his death as well. And this statue was in fact supposed to be in his tomb in Rome, but it had some, let's say, accidents. So first it was sold, then it was bought by a family of Florence, the Bandini family, who gifted this statue to the Medici in the 1600s. So now it's part of the museum. Alright, now it's time to leave the Opera del Duomo Museum to go to the Republic Square, to Piazza della Repubblica. We are now at the back of Santa Maria del Fiore. You can see on your right-hand side, right here, the bell tower, and the left aisle of the church. This is Via Calzaioli, a shopping street right now. After a couple of minutes, we turn right, and you can start to see from here this huge arch with the carousel. And this is Piazza della Repubblica. And here we are. This is how the square looks like. But it wasn't always like this. This is actually the oldest and most ancient heart of the city. This is where the Romans in 59 BC founded the city of Florence, but it looked, of course, much different. This column here is the column of the abundance, marks the intersection of the two axes of the city, as shown here in this picture. We have the Cardo, Latin name for north-south street, and the Decumano, Latin name for east-west, basically street or avenue. Then, in the Middle Ages, let's say this area became a public space for tradings, for merchants, so it was the house of the old market. And then in the 1500s, Cosimo I of the Medici family chose this area for the Jewish people, so this became a sort of ghetto. So the modern appearance of the square is the result of renovations that happened in the late 1800s when Florence became the capital of Italy, for just 7 years before Rome. So we can see, for example, this portico right here, or lodge, with an inscription. The inscription of this portico, which is in fact the symbol of the renovations of the 1800s, says that the ancient center of the city, restored from age-old squalor to new life. We disagree with that. I am a local Florentine, so we kind of disagree with what this says. In fact, when you come here to Florence and you climb the dome of Brunelleschi, you can see that the skyline of the city is pretty even and uniform, except for this. This is, now you learn a new thing as well, something that in Italian we call un pugno in un occhio, which is a punch in the eye. When something is out of place, where something doesn't belong to the square where it is. So in fact, we think of this as something that should not be here. Let's head now to the political center, to Piazza della Signoria. So this is still Piazza della Repubblica. Let's turn right. And let's keep on. This structure that you are about to see on your right-hand side is a new market lodge in comparison with the old market lodge that was in Republic Square. And welcome to Piazza della Signoria. We'll talk about this gorgeous square in the next video, the part 3 and final part of our virtual tour. So I hope you enjoyed this part. Stay tuned and see you in the next video.